Other questions? No, we're open. We're going either way.
I don't. Yeah, my work is not. How about I 1, 1, 2, 3? That's kind of not. Yeah. So she hasn't been vaccinated. Yeah, we did one with my board, and I don't know why we. Other than that.
All right, let's go. Are you ready? It's already rolling. That's a good one.
You know, like maybe you just want 1, 2, or maybe you want to wait, and how do you talk to them so that they'll actually listen or not drop your education? Yeah, or done your. Yeah.
Good. Awesome. Any other questions that come along, just fire them out and I don't know that I know all the answers. I do know whose water bottle this is, though. It's all right. Yes, I do have some ideas of where to look. So, thank you for coming. Thank you for being online. Quite a wide interest. This is obviously a subject of great emotion and all kinds of facts on all sides of the equation. Pro-vaccinators, sometimes vaccinators are partial, and I don't like to call them anti-vaccinators, but people that choose not to. Let's just say that. So wide variety. So some of you may have heard this story, but I'll start off this way. So I was 22 or 23 years old when I went to chiropractic school to start chiropractic school. We had no children. I had been married to an amazing person for about 1 or 2 years. We'd never even had a discussion on vaccination. We never talked about vaccination, never thought about vaccination. And I get to chiropractic school, and true story, I haven't started. I get there in February, doesn't start till March. I go to church the very first day, go to a little church there, and before anything else is going on, I think before the class had even started, all of a sudden, I hear this pretty contentious discussion going on. And I didn't really know very many people because it was like the first or second Sunday we were there. But finally, I turned to the guy next to me. I said, "What's going on?" He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "What are they? These guys are in a heated discussion. What am I missing?" Because I knew it wasn't church related. I could tell it was something else. And he says, "Oh, you going to chiropractic school?" I said, "Well, I haven't started. I start next month." He said, "Well, you should know." I said, "Well, I should know what?" And he said, "You should know. It's about vaccinations." And guess what my question to him was? What about vaccinations? Yeah, I've heard of them. I've gotten some. I literally had no idea that there were any sides. I didn't know there was a pro side, a choice side, an in-between side. I didn't know any of that. And so I said, wow, I guess to my sweet wife, we better figure out what we need to know about vaccination. And so that started the journey before we had our first kid. I think we didn't have our first child until about 1 year after that, something like that. So we had a window of time. Of course, this is way back. I won't tell you, it was a long time ago. It was before computers. It was before the internet. It was before cell phones. Didn't have any. You had to look it up in an encyclopedia. No, anyway, so it was hard to get information, much harder than it is now. Now, unfortunately, there's a wide plethora of information on everything. And I do have a theory, kind of off topic. No matter what medication you look up, somewhere in the side effects will be death. It just seems like acne, yeah, you can treat it. You could die, but you could have it. Anyway, sorry, that's an aside. Anyway, so I started the journey not knowing anything about anything. I was at chiropractic school, which not everybody there was. They were spread across. There were some that definitely still did vaccinate, some that delayed it, some that didn't do some until they were a certain age, or they only did one at a time. and there were definitely some people that didn't vaccinate at all. So anyway, that's where my journey began. We have 6 children. I have 14 grandchildren. We did choose to not vaccinate our children. I'll just say that up front from the studies that I did and the research that I did. And I'll tell you some of the reasons why. But it's not my decision to tell anybody in this room what they should or shouldn't do. In fact, this will get on YouTube, and I would openly say to any pediatrician out there that may happen to listen to this, I think it should be illegal for a pediatrician to tell someone they can't come to their office if they don't vaccinate. I just think that's wrong. It would be like if I am obviously in the stance of I'm very pro-choice in vaccination. For me to say to anybody that get vaccinated, you can't come to my office, I don't have a right to say that. That just seems ridiculous to me. So anyway, any pediatrician hear that, or go ahead and send it to your pediatrician. I'm happy to talk to them about it. So we're going to talk about a few things. We are going to talk about ingredients. We're going to hopefully see a little bit of a testimony of a Manhattan-based MD pediatrician. He went in front of Congress in Connecticut in 2019, pre-COVID, so that was not part of the discussion. We're going to talk about choices, and we may even talk a little bit about COVID. So let's start with ingredients. I don't know that we have enough of these. Where's my lovely assistants? Let's just see. I'm going to keep one. I may need to share. So can you pass these out, Dr. Josh? So, yes, I was referring to somebody other than Dr. Josh. 2 things we're going to look at here. On the one side is if you do choose to vaccinate, it says ask 8. That comes to, we'll talk about that. But on the flip side, if you look at this very busy paperwork here, lot of ingredients. There is still a online forum called VaxCalc, VAXCALC. Victoria, would you be willing to just write that? VAXCAL, it may be on here. No, it's probably over here.
Viable now? Something you can.
It is, he has gotten a little more wanting money. So you can still access it, but you have to pay for it, either a one-time thing or a yearly thing. It was a little more than used, but it is still viable. And what it did was you could actually put in the age of your child and say what vaccines you were thinking about getting. I'm going to do a round of DPT, diphtheria, pertussis, tetanus. And it would actually say CALC. Thank you. Anyway, and it would actually say my daughter weighs X amount of weight. She's this many months old. And it would then say, okay, so if you go with any particular brand, there are different brands out there, obviously, you would get this much of whatever some of these, let's just take a look at, let's see if I can find the one I want. Let's go to MMR. The very last one, measles, mumps, rubella, that's one that is recommended many, many times. So in it, it has these different things. Some of them, well, actually, this one's pretty easy to understand. Sucrose, vitamins, serum albumin, amino acid, bovine albumin or serum, glutamine, gelatin, neomycin, which is antibiotic, phosphate buffers, sorbitol, etc. So you could then, with this VaxCalc, you say, okay, thinking about getting an MRI for my 3-month-old or my 6-month-old, she weighs this much weight, and then you punch it in, and it would say, based on the age and weight, how much of each one of these ingredients that your child would get. So I did like that. It used to be sort of free, and now it's not. So anyway, but it's still available. Yes.
List of what's in them, like any companies, as of the discussion, tried to change.
That's a good point, and I don't know exactly when I printed this. That's a viable point. I don't know. I know that whenever I have gone to VaxCalc and I've done this thing, I used to do it in the class live, and I didn't do it this time. It always surprises me how much stuff is in there. And one of the points, in fact, you know what? Let's go ahead and let's try, Dr. Josh. If I may need your help, let's go ahead and look at this. See if we can get this to play and if we can hear it. I know we don't have this volume on at all. I don't think they look at it. To load.
No, I guess, so they.
So I'll tell a story while we're looking at this. I actually met a gentleman, forgot his name right now. Met him in North Carolina. He lived in North Carolina for a while. Our daughter lived there. And he is a lawyer by profession. He took his son into the doctor, and the doctor said, okay, we need to vaccinate your son today. And he said, but you need to sign this form. And the lawyer said, what do you mean I have to sign a form? He said, yeah, there's a form you need to sign, basically saying if there's any reaction, then we're not responsible. Awesome. Yeah, great. We're not responsible. And we're not actually 1986, there was a Congress made decision that you could not sue the actual pharmaceutical companies anymore, no matter what the damages were to your child or to yourself. So therefore, anyway, that's in place. So this lawyer said, well, I'm not going to sign this. So I don't know anything. I didn't know there was possible reactions to vaccines. So I'm not going to sign it. So if you don't sign it, you can't get the vaccines. It's fine. So he leaves and I wish I could remember his name. I used to have him in one of my PowerPoint things, but I don't remember. I'll find his name. Anyway, so he leaves and he goes and studies it out. And he said, wow, I had no idea. So the answer in that question, and that may be being very limited in the scope of doctors, but in that office, the guy didn't say anything. He said, why do I have to sign a form? He said, well, it's just a standard form. And he read it being a lawyer. He said, I'm not going to sign that. I would feel terrible if my child had her. Anyway, so this is Dr. Lawrence Palevsky. I took a course from him in somewhere in the 90s. Very sharp guy. He's extremely articulate. So he goes before Congress and you'll hear what he has to say. So I just hit play. Turned up a little.
And it reduces the probability of those people vaccinated to spread the germ to others. Never
Can you hear that?
once in my 37 years have I ever seen a study that showed that a vaccination makes the bacteria or the virus disappear from the body of those who are vaccinated. And yet, all we continue to say is that once a vaccine is given, not only are people immune, but the bacteria and viruses are no longer in their bodies to transmit to others, and that is not true. We also heard that once you're vaccinated, you are immune. Well, actually, the textbooks don't say that. The textbooks say that 2 to 10% of children who receive a vaccine actually don't develop an antibody at all. And then there's a whole number of children who will develop an antibody, but we don't even know the percentage because they will develop the antibody, but won't be protected at all. So there are more children who don't develop protection from the vaccine than are actually unvaccinated in the state of Connecticut. We are told that unvaccinated children are the only children and the only people that are capable of spreading germs. But that's not true either, because vaccinated children can still spread germs. They can still carry the bacteria and viruses that we vaccinate against, and so can adults. Adults can also carry the bacteria and viruses that we vaccinate against. We are told that when you vaccinate, the bacteria and the viruses completely disappear from the earth. Well, they don't. They change activity, they may mutate. You heard before that the measles virus doesn't mutate. Well, it does. There are cases of outbreaks in Canada that have shown that a new virus came about. And there are studies in the literature that show that when a vaccine is given, you can induce a strain replacement, meaning that over time, the bacteria and the viruses will mutate, but they don't disappear from the earth. They are still here, their activities change, and they may even mutate. And even those who are vaccinated can still carry them and transmit them. But unfortunately, we're targeting 2% of the children who are not the sole carriers or transmitters of germs, and vaccinations don't stop people from carrying and transmitting germs just because they've been given the vaccine. My last point is we heard that vaccines are unequivocally safe. We have a public health crisis in our midst, chronic illness, brain damage, neurodevelopmental disability, and there are chemicals in the vaccines that are shown in animal studies to contribute to this kind of brain inflammation that we are turning our backs on. And we are creating many of these children, and we are ignoring it for the sake of continuing to vaccinate. Thank you.
So he goes on to answer, can you get it back to the PowerPoint, Dr. Josh? He goes on to answer a bunch of questions about a variety of things, including one of the scary ones was how some of the emulsifiers that they put in the vaccine helps it carry it to the body. And one of them talked about nanoparticles. And there may be people here that understand nanoparticles much more than than I do. We have a resident nerd here. So if we need explanation, it's an agreed upon thing. And he's fine being the smart guy in the room. That actually helps take the vaccine from the site and bring it to the rest of the body. And one of the nanoparticle thing that he goes into can actually cross the blood-brain barrier. So there's a blood-brain barrier that tries to keep bad things out of the brain for obvious reasons. And part of what they do in some of them, including aluminum is one of them, and they still do use it because the argument was, and they talked about it, the argument is that, well, it's such a teeny amount, then what's the big deal? But that was one of the things you put in a vaccine that can help get across the blood-brain barrier, which is, in my opinion, scary. So he goes, go ahead, Misty.
Had a pediatrician thinking about it. And they're like, there's not aluminum in them anymore. So I was like, I don't want aluminum. They're like kind of on the spot and stuff. And they're like, it's not true. They're not in it. But
There is still that. Mercury is the one they really took a major stance against. Mercury. The last I knew was that it was still in some flu vaccines, but in most of the other vaccines, it is not there anymore. You know anything different than that? Okay. Right. The vet tech. Okay.
But as far as I know, mercury's not us.
Right.
It's mostly the formaldehyde.
Yeah. So there are formaldehyde. There is fetal tissue in a lot of them. Just a whole bunch of stuff that if anybody said to a parent, hey, can I give your kid a little formaldehyde? Sure. I like that stuff. Give me, anyway. So I'm being a little facetious, but for me, when I did look at what all the ingredients were, so my idea of helping someone be protected from a disease was that as a child and as a parent, we did have chickenpox parties. And this, I may be showing my age. That may be right post-COVID. That would probably scare everybody. Oh my gosh, are you kidding me? Anyway, but I remember I was at a friend's house. I looked at my tummy and I saw these little spots on it. So I said to the mom of my friend, I said, hey, what is that? Oh, I think it's chickenpox. But she didn't freak out. She said, fine, hang out, play with my son. He hasn't had them yet. And then when we, as parents, had our kids had chickenpox, we would tell, not all of our friends, because some friends would run the other way and never talk to us again. But some friends would say, hey, you know what? Little so-and-so has chickenpox. And that was a very easy way. Yes, they would touch each other because kids play and they touch each other. So I like that. What I like the concept of vaccination being, if you could actually help prevent all the diseases that they're against in a natural way, then that would be okay. I think that I would look at it differently than I do. However, with so many ingredients in it that are just really tough on the body, and some kids react a lot more strongly than others. And I can't tell you how many times we've had children come in here, and the people that have worked with me for a little while, on our form for a child to come in, we ask if they're current with their vaccine schedule. What have they done about vaccine? I think it's something like that. What have you done about vaccines? And some people answer regular schedule, whether the baby's a day old or 2 months old or a year old or whatever. And others will just say, I chose not to do, or I just did these, whatever. Just had one come in very recently. And I asked that question because they said, yeah, 2 months old, it was fine. And then at 3 months old, all of a sudden, now she's colicky, she's screaming, she's having a tough time eating, and all kinds of things just seem to happen. I said, so I looked at the thing and she said, yeah, we did the regular schedule. So at 2 months old, we gave the baby the vaccine schedule, which I was going to count them, by the way. I just pulled this off the CDC site, and they were just I couldn't count them all. It just this you can go on and you look at it yourself. It says recommended schedule. Anyway, so I said, so then after the vaccine, you noticed a change, and she said, I hadn't thought about that, but yes, it was after that. So not everybody that gets a vaccine gets an immediate reaction, but there's a lot of evidence that's true of COVID. It's true of DPTs, MMRs. DPT was one of the bigger offenders in the beginning. They sort of have tried to make that a little less alien to the body. But I have a good friend who has a son who's 45 years old, and he is permanently frozen at 10 months old. So he's my size, but he wears diapers. He can only articulate like a little teeny 10-month-old can, and he was vaccine damaged. It was a DPT vaccine in his case. So, yeah, so nanoparticles, he talked about emulsifiers. Since he did this, there is actually, and that's the YouTube thing. Vax versus non-vax. One of the things that we're going to give to you, there was a study done, and do we have a copy of that? Do you know where that is? Lainey had one. Can you look and see? It's a pretty big article. It's vaccinated versus unvaccinated children. And what it shows was that the unvaccinated children were pretty big percentages less likely to get a whole bunch of things. What do you think might be among those things? We don't have to go all the way to autism. We won't talk about that yet. We'll leave that to the end. Okay, diabetes, allergies, sinus conditions, some of those kinds of things that it has irritated the immune system enough that their body is way more likely to overreact to other things. It's going to be somewhere. They'll find it. Anyway, yes.
Along with that, there's speculation that autoimmune diseases can come from a virus that then your body overreacts to. So I know it's been speculated that if the viruses, like I said, are staying dormant in your body forever, you're getting like 70 of them. That's more than you would maybe catch just naturally.
No, it's actually, there should be, yeah, actually it's several pages. Actually, it does talk about it though. Yeah, vaccinated children were significantly more likely to, there it is, thank you. So this just kind of shows a graphic. And I can give you the link for this, but vaccinated children were 30% more likely to have allergies and cold issues. They were 5.2% more likely to have learning disabilities, 4.4 times more likely to have ADHD, 4 times more likely to have autism, and on it goes. 3 times more likely to have eczema, etc. So I can give you the link to that. Because one of the things he talked about was, I wish there was a study that showed unvaccinated versus vaccinated, so we could actually compare them. And this was what this study was done, and it was homeschool children, and it was done in, I can't see the date, maybe 2017. So he wasn't aware of it at the time, or I think it was after that. Anyway, yes, vaxxed versus non-vaxxed. So we're going to keep going here. So the tough question is, what should you choose as a parent? You can get the vaccinations, you can delay them, or you can get no vaccinations at all. So there's obviously huge pro cons on all those suggestions. If you do get the vaccinations, the pro would be that you're hoping that your child would be immune from all those diseases, right? I mean, am I making a correct statement? Yes. The con could obviously be the reactions to that. And that one of the reasons why do you think they keep doing the same one? They do multiple versions of DPT, multiple versions of MMR. Why do you think they do multiple versions? Because they know, the titer is, That's right. So there's a titer they actually can measure the effectiveness of having antibodies against measles, mumps, rubella, diphtheria, pertussis, tetanus, etc. And what they find is over a period of time, even if the body did react and develop them, then they go down. So then you need to do it again. And that's why there's the multiple inoculations, vaccinations instead of just one time. Boosters, yeah. There we go. Yes, boosters. So number 2, you could say, you know what? I'd kind of like to not do it when my baby's 1 day old. By the way, I will come out a strong statement, and if the pediatricians listen to this too. Day 1 of life, what are the 2 things that a child is supposed to have? So go. Right. Vitamin K, in case there's a bleeding disorder, which is extremely rare. I did some research on this. I don't have it right in front of me, but I did do research on that. It does occasionally happen, like in 1 out of a huge number of cases. And the other one is Hep B. Anybody know what Hep B is created for? Why they recommend it for babies in case mom has hepatitis. And if she doesn't, and the way you get hepatitis B anyways, sexually transmitted or drug use, sharing needles and so forth. So my answer to that would be the same as when our first child was born in 1980, and they were all about the cream, the cream for the eyes, and it was anti-gonorrheal or syphilis. And I said, hey, go ahead and test my wife for STDs. And if she doesn't have them, then you're not putting any cream in my kid's eye. And now they use erythromycin. Back in the day, what was it that they used? Can't remember. Now it's an antibiotic. Something that was stronger back then. Can't remember. No, that would be a better thing, but it was something pretty aggressive. Anyway, so the same thing, if your mother does have hepatitis, then that's a time to consider, okay, what are we going to do about that? Do we need to give our baby a Hep B shot? But if your mom does not have hepatitis and is not likely to have an STD, then that's really a ridiculous, because the child has certainly not used any needles or had a sexually transmitted disease themselves. So anyway, that is one that I don't, I mean, and again, there's not a lot of education going on. It's not like the doctors typically will ask you, so do you want this or not? They're assuming that you do want it, and that's what they do. And then no vaccinations. So the pro of that would not be putting things in your body. The con of that would be if you're worried about those diseases. The measles, mumps, rubella, DPT, diphtheria, pertussis, tetanus, polio, etc. So you have to figure out where in here, and Japan actually did delay. I don't remember what the age was, but they delayed. They said, okay, we're not doing them right off. Not doing them in babies. We're not going to do it even 1-year-old. We're going to wait. And they had a dramatic decrease of all kinds of other chronic illnesses. Yes?
This discussion is not only good to have spouse or significant other, but also nowadays most have a birth plan. The hospitals
It's true. It's a good point.
But it's a lot harder to make decisions.
That's true.
In the birth plan, everybody knows they got a problem with the products way before the actual annual pediatrician.
It's a good point. Yes.
One plug for, if you do feel like you want to do them, but are leaning towards delaying, a baby's gut and microbiome is they have almost essentially, they don't have a leaky gut, but their body's not fully formed, right? And their microbiome is what it's going to be. But by the time that they're 1, they have essentially the same microbiome as a 19. So it's kind of like by the time you're 1, you're gonna stay pretty average unless you're exposed to things or we eat crap things. That's a whole other discussion. But
It's good. That's a good point.
so if you are wanting to give some, they're look into waiting at least till they're 1.
Good point. Thank you. So this is a big reason why we have the class, and why I've done this for now 40 years is some people don't know there is a choice. They just think you have to do whatever the doctor says to do, whatever your mom tells you to do, whatever your dad, whatever, whomever the authority is, you just have to, okay, this is my choice. I've got to do this. So I just wanted to make sure that people know that there are choices. In the state of Utah, I don't know if this is my next slide or not. We'll get to that in a second. I'll just finish this. In the state of Utah, you can philosophically object to getting a vaccine. I'm from the state of Maine. That no longer is optional there. So our grandchildren are actually being homeschooled because my son and daughter-in-law do not want to do vaccines. But it was a very strong law that was passed, which is sad and whatever, but that's what happened. So I just want people to know that you do have a choice. You can choose not to or to delay. Yes.
So in other states, though, if you want to.
It's trickier. It's trickier. And so this one lawyer, and I'll find the guy's name. He actually has helped a lot of people in different states in the country to be able to find a way to object and say, I'm just not gonna do that to myself, my child, whatever. And that was part of what he did. Some states, someone brought up earlier that in the state of New York, they actually are starting to put parents in jail that were not vaccinated children. And that had a huge backlash. That was probably at least a decade ago, I think, 5 or 10 years ago. And that finally said, okay, this is kind of anti-American, anti-rights, so we're not going to do that anymore. Okay. Do I say, so if you do choose to get a vaccine, it is on the one side here, the NVIC, which is a great organization, lots of information on it, National Vaccine Information Center. It says you should ask 8 questions. Is your child sick right now? Have they had a bad reaction before? Is there a personal history of vaccine reactions? Do I know the disease and the vaccine risks? Do I have full information about the side effects of vaccines? Do I know how to identify and report a vaccine reaction? Do I know that I need to keep a written record, including the vaccine number, etc.? And that's the Childhood Vaccine Injury Act of 1986. And do I know I have a right to make an informed choice? So if you do choose to do that, then those would be good questions. Any question about that? Make sense? Utah, I said, is one state, 12 states right now, or when I did this PowerPoint, which is about a year ago, that you fill out a form. They may or may not still make you watch this short little video. I'll tell a quick story, and then we'll yes. So here we go. About 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I was asked innocently, we had this funky little bookstore in Maine, in Waterville, Maine, and they had a lot of forums where they'd have discussions about different things. And so I knew the owner pretty well. She said, hey, would you be willing to come and be a part of a panel on vaccines? And I said, I should have asked more questions. I said, sure, why not? I'll come. So I get there and there's 5 of us. All right, so we have pediatrician dude. Let's see. We have 1 MD, 2 DOs, 1 naturopath, 1 chiropractor. I'm the chiropractor. Naturopath was a woman who never said a word all night. No matter what the question was. Afterwards, I said, what's the deal? Why? She said, I was just too scared. I didn't want to say anything. The 2 DOs, actually, both of them were my friends. Very good friends. Referred people to me, referred children to me, came to me as well. They were both divided on the whole thing. They had a different opinion. The 1 MD was pro all the way. He says, whatever the American Pediatric Association says, that's what I do. And guess who was the least informed of all 5? Well, we don't know about her because we never heard from her. But out of the other 4, he was the least informed. He had no idea about anything. Didn't know ingredients. The DOs and I had a decent sort of discussion, and we talked about a variety of things. But that guy anyway. So yeah, don't necessarily count on your doctor to be very well informed. That's what that slide was for. COVID vaccine, we're just going to skip over that. So here's what I would suggest. And then anybody has any other questions? This one's probably the toughest question, and we'll talk about that separately. How many is a lot. Ingredients talked about, little choices we talked about, how to talk to your pediatrician. We should talk about that too. So I would say, first of all, share what you've learned and learn more. Be informed, believe in the power that made the body, and ask questions. So here is my take and what I would say to a pediatrician, what I have in the past. Okay. But I have said in the past, I'll tell you a couple stories. So our son at the time was like 8 years old, breaks his collarbone. I don't fix collarbones. So into the emergency room we go, and we go in the room, and there's an older nurse, probably interesting. She's probably younger than I am. At that time, she seemed older to me. Anyway, so she says to me, "Okay, so what have you vaccinations?" I was one of the first. What have you done vaccinations? I said, "Haven't done anything." And she looks at me, and then she turns around and closes the door. I said, "Okay, here we go. I'm gonna get smacked around in here." And she gave me a big hug. I said, "So what's going on?" She said, "I used to work in New York, right in the city. Anytime there was a vaccine reaction, we could not talk about it. We could not say there was an association. If we did, we could lose our job at the hospital." And she said, "I just always hug any parent that shows them not to do that." I said, "Well, great." Anyway, so that was one story. The other story I wanted to say is I really do believe the power that made the body can heal the body. And I had a woman who was a patient and friend, and she said this to me once, and I have never forgotten. And she said, she has 8 kids, by the way. She said, "If my child is unvaccinated and they get one of the diseases that they're supposed to prevent, then we deal with it. If they got measles, they got mumps, they got rubella, whatever they got, we would figure out what to do with that. We figure out how to raise their immune system. We do what we had to do to take action and help. However, if on the other hand, my child got a reaction to a vaccine," she said, "I don't know how I could forgive myself." So that's kind of been my philosophy from 40 something years ago when we had our first kid. So, let's see. I was going to say this one. I'll talk about that one real quick, and then we'll quit. And then anybody wants to stay can stay, or we'll officially quit. How to talk to a pediatrician. I felt terrible because my oldest son, who hates confrontation, called me after the pediatrician visit. He had his first child. I didn't think about the fact that he was going to go to a pediatrician. And so he goes in, the pediatrician says, "Okay, vaccination. We didn't get him at birth, so we need to do them now." And my son just kind of freezes, and he said, "Why aren't you getting vaccinations?" "I don't know." And then my son really doesn't like, and neither does my daughter-in-law. And so they're just kind of freaking out. And then finally, my son says, "Well, you know what? Actually, I didn't get vaccinated, and I was healthier than all my friends. So for today, we're just not going to do that." I would say to be as informed as you can be. And you probably, if you do some degree of study, you're going to know more than the pediatrician does. And you just decide how much of an argument you want to have, how much of a discussion you want to have, and just say, "Look, this is my child. I made a decision. I've researched it. This is what I've decided to do. To do some, to do none, or to do a whole bunch." So anyway, so I would leave you with that thought officially. The Zoom line's going to quit on us. And if anybody has any additional questions, we'll be happy to answer. So we're going to cut that off. So, VaxCalc. So I'm going to give you some resources. I can actually send you some links. Some of these may be outdated, so I'm going to follow what Megan suggested. I will send them out by next week. We leave tomorrow to go to Philadelphia, so I may not get time to do that then. But I will send out recent links. One of the best ones that I do recommend, you can pass these out. The NVIC is it is a center that was founded because their kids had reactions. So but they're very open about what they share information-wise. That's the NVIC.org. The ICPA is the association I belonged to for about 40 years, and they have a lot of information on their website. Vaccines Revealed is what it is, and then the vaccinated versus unvaccinated study. So, any additional questions?